She thought her wedding day would mark a new beginning. But just 4 hours after saying "I do," she uncovered a betrayal so shocking it shattered her entire world. What she found her husband doing, with her own father, turned her perfect day into a criminal nightmare. Madison Hale had imagined her wedding day since childhood, picturing a moment filled with calm, warmth, and certainty. When the day finally arrived, it felt almost unreal. Soft morning sunlight spread across the small Tennessee venue, giving everything a gentle glow that made her believe nothing could go wrong. Relatives moved around her with excitement, arranging flowers, adjusting decorations, and offering supportive smiles. She felt a steady sense of comfort knowing her closest friends were nearby, guiding each step with care. The ceremony unfolded smoothly, with every detail seeming to fall perfectly into place. Madison walked down the aisle feeling a mixture of joy and nervous energy, convinced she was stepping into a life built on trust and honesty. Alex Warren stood waiting with the calm expression she had always admired, and his presence eased her fears. The vows were short and heartfelt, creating a moment that felt meaningful and steady. After the ceremony, guests gathered for a small reception filled with laughter, music, and gentle conversations. Plates clattered softly, cameras flashed, and children ran across the grass as the evening slowly settled. Madison moved through the crowd feeling light and hopeful, believing she had entered a stable future. She noticed her father, Mark Hale, slipping in and out of conversations, but she thought he was simply overwhelmed by emotion. Nothing around her seemed out of place. The atmosphere felt peaceful, almost protective, as if the world was rewarding her for trusting the right people. Madison held on to that feeling, unaware that the foundation beneath her was already shifting, preparing to reveal a truth she never expected. Everything appeared perfect, hiding the storm quietly forming just beyond her sight today. Madison tried to enjoy the reception, but a quiet tension kept tugging at her attention. It wasn't loud or obvious, just a subtle shift in the atmosphere whenever Alex and her father, Mark Hale, were near each other. She noticed the way they exchanged quick glances, as if sharing thoughts they didn't want anyone else to see. At first, she assumed it was normal wedding day stress, the kind that made people rush around and handle last-minute details. Still, something about their behavior felt slightly off, like a small glitch in an otherwise perfect picture. As guests laughed and clinked glasses, Madison spotted Alex and Mark stepping away from the crowd several times. They moved with an urgency that didn't match the cheerful environment. Each time they returned, their expressions seemed tense, almost strained, before quickly softening again. Madison watched them from across the yard, trying to understand what they could possibly be discussing so privately on a day meant for celebration. She considered approaching them, but the thought of interrupting made her hesitate. She convinced herself they were handling something related to the event, perhaps an issue with the catering or a misplaced item. The explanations she created made sense, yet the uneasy feeling lingered. It stayed in the back of her mind like a quiet whisper, persistent but hard to define. Even during group photos, she noticed Alex's distracted posture and her father's stiff, guarded demeanor. Their smiles looked forced, lacking the warmth she expected from two people she trusted deeply. Though she pushed the discomfort aside, it didn't fade. Instead, it settled into her thoughts, marking the first small crack in a day she had believed was flawless. Madison sensed something was beginning to shift, even if she couldn't name it yet. As the evening moved forward, the reception began to settle into a calmer rhythm. Guests gathered around tables, finishing their meals, while others drifted toward the dance floor. Madison tried to stay present, greeting relatives and posing for photos, but her mind kept returning to the strange tension she had sensed earlier. She brushed it off repeatedly, reminding herself that stress was normal on wedding days. Still, something uneasy lingered beneath the surface. About 4 hours after the ceremony, Madison noticed Alex wasn't beside her anymore. She scanned the yard, expecting to see him chatting with guests or taking a moment to rest. Instead, he was nowhere in sight. A few people mentioned he had stepped out for some fresh air. It sounded harmless, yet Madison felt a faint pull of concern. Moments later, she realized her father was missing too. The coincidence tightened her chest. She moved quietly away from the crowd, pretending she was just stretching her legs. The laughter and music behind her grew softer with each step. She followed the dim path leading toward the back of the property, where the lights faded and the sounds of celebration became distant. The cool air brushed against her skin as she continued walking, guided only by instinct. A soft crunch of gravel under her shoes echoed in the quiet space. Shadows stretched between old trees, and the reception lights barely reached this far. Madison paused, listening, but heard nothing except the quiet hum of night insects. Her heartbeat grew louder, matching the uneasiness she had been trying to ignore all day. Something inside her insisted she keep moving. She stepped farther into the darker area behind the venue, unaware she was moments away from uncovering the truth that would shatter everything she believed about the two men she trusted most. Madison slowed her steps as she approached the back of the property, moving carefully through the dim pathway behind the old storage building. The faint sound of rustling caught her attention, sharp enough to stop her in place. She listened closely, unsure whether it was an animal or something else. The building's shadow stretched across the ground, hiding whatever activity was happening behind it. A soft glow flickered against the wall, as if a flashlight was being moved around. The sight tightened her chest with a growing sense of dread. Curiosity and fear pushed her forward. She stepped closer, keeping her movements quiet and controlled. When she rounded the corner, the truth struck her so forcefully that she froze. Alex and her father were crouched near the locked containers that held the wedding gifts. Torn envelopes were scattered around their feet. Cards had been ripped open, and the cash placed inside had been stuffed into a dark bag lying between them. They worked quickly, opening one gift after another, moving with the confidence of people who had practiced this before. Madison felt her stomach twist. The scene didn't look impulsive or desperate. It was organized, coordinated, and deliberate. The two people she trusted most were stealing from her on the very day meant to celebrate her future. Her heart pounded as she realized this act wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision. It had been planned. The wedding itself had been used as a shield. She stepped back into the shadows before they noticed her. Every part of her body trembled, not just from shock, but from the weight of betrayal settling over her. The perfect day she had imagined was gone. In its place stood a painful truth she could never have prepared for, one that changed everything in a single moment. Madison remained hidden in the shadows, trying to steady her breathing as the reality of what she had witnessed settled heavily over her. The image of Alex and her father stealing from the gift containers replayed in her mind with painful clarity. Every detail felt like a direct blow. The man she had married only hours earlier had never intended to build a life with her. Instead, he had approached her with a purpose rooted in deceit. All the gentle gestures, careful words, and promises of a shared future now revealed themselves as pieces of a larger plan she had never suspected. The presence of her father made the betrayal even sharper. She had always believed he wanted the best for her, even when they disagreed. Seeing him work alongside Alex shattered that belief completely. It wasn't just dishonesty. It was a choice, a deliberate decision to join a scheme that used her wedding as cover. The thought left her feeling hollow, as if something essential had been torn away in an instant. Madison forced herself to stay silent, knowing she needed to act carefully. If either of them discovered she had seen their actions, she had no idea how they would respond. The darkness around her suddenly felt like protection, allowing her a moment to think. She knew she couldn't confront them alone. She needed help, and she needed it without raising suspicion. Slowly, she began stepping back toward the path, keeping her movements controlled and quiet. The distance between her and the scene grew, but the weight of what she had uncovered only increased. Madison felt a mixture of fear, anger, and heartbreak as she returned to the reception. Her life had changed in one moment, and now she had to figure out how to protect herself from the two people she once believed she could trust completely. Madison stepped back into the soft glow of the reception lights, doing everything in her power to steady her expression. She knew that any sign of distress could draw attention, and attention might alert Alex or her father before she had a chance to act. The music, laughter, and warm chatter felt strangely distant now, as though she were watching everything through a thin layer of glass. Her hands trembled slightly, so she clasped them together and moved through the crowd with practiced calm. She found her cousins near one of the tables, busy arranging dessert plates. They noticed her approach, but she didn't allow her emotions to spill over. Instead, she slipped a small folded note into the hand of the cousin closest to her. The quiet urgency in Madison's eyes was enough for them to take it seriously without asking questions. They read the message privately and immediately understood the danger. Within minutes, they stepped away as if handling a normal task and contacted local authorities. They reported suspicious activity around the venue's back area and requested immediate assistance. Madison stayed inside, pretending to mingle, keeping her movements natural. Her heart raced with every passing second, but she forced herself to maintain composure. She avoided looking toward the area where Alex and her father had disappeared. She knew she needed to give police time to respond without drawing attention to herself. The fear of being discovered hovered at the edge of her thoughts, but she pushed it down, focusing instead on the safety the authorities could bring. The minutes felt long and heavy. Madison's mind replayed the theft repeatedly, but she refused to let panic take over. She stood among family and friends, silently waiting, knowing that the truth would soon reach the surface and expose everything they had tried so carefully to hide. Alex and Mark eventually returned to the reception area, moving with forced ease as if nothing unusual had happened at all. Madison watched them from a distance, her expression kept deliberately calm. The dark bag filled with stolen envelopes was no longer visible, but she noticed how carefully Alex kept one hand close to his jacket pocket, as though guarding something important. Mark's posture was stiff, his eyes scanning the crowd with restless alertness. They seemed to sense something had shifted, though they couldn't yet pinpoint what. Moments later, faint flashes of blue and red lights reached the edge of the property. Police vehicles were arriving quietly, their tires crunching over the gravel path. Madison's cousins subtly guided guests away from the front entrance to avoid creating panic. The officers moved quickly but without alarm, approaching the venue with measured steps, prepared to investigate the report they had received. Alex noticed the lights first. His face tightened instantly, the calm facade falling away. He leaned toward Mark, and the two men exchanged a brief, panicked look. Without hesitation, they began moving toward the parking area, their pace accelerating with every step. The urgency in their actions confirmed everything Madison had witnessed. The crowd remained unaware of what was happening as Alex and Mark slipped past the outer tables, trying to avoid drawing attention. Their movements were sharp and tense, lacking the casual ease they had displayed earlier. They reached their car, fumbling for the keys, clearly hoping to escape before officers reached them. Madison watched from across the yard, her heart pounding. She felt no urge to intervene. The situation was now beyond her hands. What mattered most was that their attempt to run proved their guilt. The truth was finally unraveling, and their desperate actions only pushed the consequences closer. The police intercepted Alex and Mark just as they were about to start the engine of their car. Officers approached from both sides, blocking the vehicle with calm but firm authority. The men inside reacted with visible panic. Alex gripped the steering wheel tightly, while Mark glanced around as though searching for an escape route that didn't exist. The flashing lights illuminated their tense faces, exposing the fear behind their hurried plan. Guests near the entrance began to notice the commotion, whispering among themselves as officers instructed both men to step out of the vehicle. When Alex hesitated, an officer opened the driver's door, guiding him out with practiced precision. Mark followed, his movements rigid and uneasy. The trunk and back seat were quickly searched, and it didn't take long for the authorities to find the dark bag hidden beneath a layer of jackets. Inside the bag lay dozens of torn envelopes stuffed with cash, wedding gifts meant for Madison and Alex. The evidence was undeniable. Officers collected the opened cards scattered throughout the bag, carefully noting names, dates, and handwriting styles. Each detail pointed directly to the crime Madison had witnessed earlier. As the crowd slowly gathered at a distance, confusion spread across the guests' faces. They watched as officers questioned Alex and Mark, documenting their inconsistent explanations. The investigation expanded quickly when police discovered the containers behind the storage building, still littered with ripped envelopes and discarded packaging. It was clear the theft had been ongoing for some time before Madison spotted them. With the evidence secured, Alex and Mark were handcuffed and placed into separate police cars. Their attempt to flee had only deepened suspicion. As the vehicles pulled away, a heavy silence settled over the venue. The truth had surfaced completely, leaving no room for denial or escape. Early the next morning, Madison filed for an annulment, determined to separate herself from the betrayal as quickly as possible. The shock of the previous night still clung to her, but she knew she had to act decisively. Her cousins stayed by her side, helping her navigate the immediate steps while the authorities continued gathering evidence. News of the arrest spread through the small community with surprising speed. Friends, neighbors, and distant relatives reached out with disbelief, struggling to understand how such a scheme could unfold on what should have been a joyful celebration. Alex and Mark faced several charges, including theft, conspiracy, and fraud. Investigators uncovered additional details as they examined the stolen items, interviewed guests, and traced communication records. The partnership between Alex and Mark became increasingly clear. Their actions were not impulsive, but the result of weeks, possibly months, of planning. Officers collected digital messages, bank withdrawals, and meeting records that suggested both men had built a detailed strategy long before the wedding day. The discovery only deepened Madison's sense of violation. Despite the growing chaos, Madison refused to attend the hearings. She chose to distance herself from the courtroom drama, focusing instead on reclaiming her emotional stability. She leaned on family members who offered quiet support, understanding that she needed time to process everything. The annulment proceeded smoothly, with sympathetic officials guiding her through each requirement. As the legal process moved forward, Madison began rebuilding her daily routines. She returned to work, reconnected with close friends, and tried to restore a sense of normalcy. The betrayal still weighed on her, but she refused to let it define her. She reminded herself that healing would take time, and every step, no matter how small, pulled her further away from the damage Alex and her father had caused. Months after the incident, investigators continued reviewing financial records connected to the case. During this extended examination, they uncovered a series of earlier transactions between Alex and Mark that revealed a deeper layer to their partnership. Small but frequent payments had been exchanged throughout the engagement period, disguised as reimbursements or casual transfers. The pattern was subtle enough to avoid early suspicion, but clear once placed against the timeline of events. This discovery confirmed that Alex had approached Mark long before proposing to Madison, securing his involvement through quiet incentives and persistent planning. What Madison had believed to be a genuine relationship had been nothing more than a calculated arrangement built on deception. The findings were added to the case file, strengthening the charges against both men. For the community, the revelation brought a mix of shock and disappointment. Many had known Mark for years, and the idea that he helped orchestrate a scheme against his own daughter left people unsettled. Conversations circulated through town, not out of malice, but out of disbelief. The story served as a harsh reminder that betrayal could come from the places least expected. Madison, meanwhile, focused on rebuilding her life with deliberate care. She shared her experience only when necessary, choosing not to let the scandal define her. Instead, she poured her energy into small steps that brought her peace. She revisited hobbies she once loved, strengthened connections with supportive relatives, and allowed herself the space to heal without rushing the process. Over time, the pain became less sharp, replaced by a quiet resilience shaped by everything she had endured. She eventually chose to tell her story publicly, not for sympathy, but to help others recognize early signs of manipulation and hidden motives. By turning her darkest experience into a lesson for others, Madison reclaimed her sense of control and reminded herself that trust, once broken, could lead to a stronger understanding of who truly belonged in her life.